Old Mutual is Britain's third biggest insurer, and it also handles asset and wealth management. The company just saw first half operating profit rise 15% to £845 million. Well, I'm now joined by Julian Roberts, the Chief Executive of Old Mutual. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, I want to get back to your earnings in just a minute, but what do you make of the global market sell-off? It's pretty spooky for investors. How does it make you feel about the economic uncertainty out there? Has it just increased twofold?
Well, there is huge uncertainty going on, and it's really quite odd because corporate results are pretty good. Corporates have got considerable amounts of cash. Their earnings generally are okay. But what you've got is a lack of confidence, and the lack of confidence driven by this huge amount of government debt around Europe, in the US. And that's what's driving everything down, because if there's not confidence, then there is doubt on how this debt can be dealt with. But you compare that to the big trading companies, companies like ourselves, that are still doing pretty well.
Yeah, but
so
Mr. Roberts,
at some stage we will get a rebalance.
I just want to get your feeling, because not only are investors spooked, but it seems that we're in a complete policy impasse. The governments and the central banks don't seem to be able to deal with it unless we put extra quantitative easing on the markets, and that poses a whole other problems for their debts and their deficits. Are you concerned that actually governments around the world aren't taking this seriously enough and are just not taking the right actions?
No, I think they are dealing with the thing properly. We probably are going to have another quantitative easing because that is the way that confidence comes back. And the problem is there is a general lack of confidence. People are therefore saving their money, they're not spending it, and therefore you're not able to deal with the fundamental growth issues. It's the issue of growth, it's the issue of confidence, and that's what governments need to deal with, and I believe they know that.
And your profits are actually up nicely, but do you have any kind of idea for every 1 or 2 percentage points that the markets lose, how that impacts your revenue or how that impacts your profit on the longer term?
Well, the interesting thing for us is because a considerable amount of our profits are in the emerging markets, you know, GDP growth particularly in Africa, where we're heavily based, is very strong. So we have that robustness in our overall result because we're heavily exposed to emerging markets. Quite clearly, when you come towards Europe, we come to our UK business. Right now, interestingly, until the end of 2012, as people switch from equities into cash, then that does affect our profits, but not hugely.
Now, of course, in today's market sell-off, a lot of the Asian markets were also affected. Do you believe if we see a US downgrade, or if we see much more nervousness here in the Western economies because of the deficits and because of the money we have to spend to actually start our economies growing, that Asia will survive any impact, that there won't be a double-dip recession across the world?
I think the Asian market is pretty robust. I think where you've got a problem in the US than elsewhere, their growth may come down. But I think Asia, China has still got a fair amount of growth to keep it going.
What's your biggest fear for this year? You have said that actually you're on track to achieve your 2012 targets. Is there anything, for example, a market sell-off, a huge market sell-off, or just, you know, plunging back into recession that will not enable you to achieve those targets?
Yes, I think the biggest problem for us is a significant amount of our revenue from our asset management business, from our European business, is based on asset levels. So as asset levels come off, that does affect our profits. But as I said before, we've got a good global diversified mix, heavily involved in the emerging markets, and therefore I think we're in a pretty robust position.
And Mr. Roberts, have you spoken to anyone in terms of the asset management, how much they've lost over the last couple of weeks and last 2 weeks? I mean, I think more than $4 trillion have been wiped off the market.
Yeah, no, I haven't gone through the detail. Fortunately, with us, again, we have 20 different styles in different companies in the US. And as people move from one style, then we're fortunate that we pick it up in another. So there is, again, a reasonable amount of diversity. And that's the key thing for our group, is to make sure that as customers want to move their money, we have the products and the availability for them to move into.
All right, Julian Roberts, a real pleasure to speak to you, the Chief Executive there of Old Mutual.